Okay, is everybody ready?
Yes, sir.
We're good? Okay. First of all, thank you all for being here, and thank you to my colleagues for being here to support as well. In short, our border is being overrun by illegal aliens, and it's painfully clear at this point that our governor and our president are doing nothing about it. When those that are responsible for the disaster at our border refuse to do their jobs, when they look the other way while our children are being killed by drugs, while there's human trafficking and crime filling our streets, I refuse to stand by and do nothing about it, and my colleagues that are behind me, my colleagues that are behind me refuse to do so as well. So I've introduced the Protecting Arizona Against Illegal Immigration Act as a ballot initiative because I believe my fellow Arizonans are ready to make a change. We may not be able to do the federal government's job, but we can definitely stop Arizona from becoming like California. Our message to illegal immigrants is simple. If you want to take advantage of Americans, go somewhere else. The act, which is HCR 2060, is one of the toughest laws on illegal immigration ever written. It has three major objectives. First, to close loopholes that allow aliens to work illegally in Arizona. To save Arizona billions each year by closing loopholes illegal aliens exploit to receive welfare and other taxpayer-funded benefits. And three, to make it a felony to knowingly assist an illegal alien in breaking our employment laws. As I said at the beginning, in short, if this ballot initiative passes, illegal aliens will have every reason to leave the state of Arizona. To give you a few data points, the Federation for American Immigration Reform estimates that Arizona spends nearly $2.3 billion a year on expenditures for illegal aliens each year. Last year, nearly 600,000 illegal aliens were encountered by Border Patrol in southern Arizona. If all of those people were to remain in Arizona, the state spending on illegal aliens would increase to over $5.3 billion a year. HCR 2060 builds on the Legal Arizona Workers Act, commonly known as the E-Verify law, which was passed in 2008 and was upheld as constitutional by the United States Supreme Court. As you may know, the Legal Arizona Workers Act already allows the state to suspend or revoke business licenses of employers who knowingly hire unauthorized workers, and it requires employers to verify that an employee is lawfully present and eligible to work in the United States. But HCR 2060 further strengthens Arizona's employment laws in several significant ways. One, it enables the Attorney General and county attorneys to investigate violations of the E-Verify law and creates large financial penalties for employers who violate the law. It also extends the E-Verify requirements to some independent contractors who are paid more than $600 a year. Further, the Protecting Arizona Against Illegal Immigration Act also holds state and local government agencies more accountable for how they spend tax dollars and whom they grant state credentials by requiring all agencies that issue licenses to use E-Verify to confirm the license applicants are lawfully present, and prohibits state and local governments from giving taxpayer-funded financial aid or benefits that exceed $500 per year to adults who are not legally present in the state. Finally, HCR 2060 strengthens law enforcement's ability to enforce the law by making it a Class 6 felony if someone refuses to use E-Verify when required by law or does anything to obstruct another person's legal duty to use E-Verify. Creates hefty fines for those who hire illegals at $10,000 per violation, and gives law enforcement more power and resources to enforce the law because instead of a slap on the wrist, violations of the law have real consequences and fines can be used to reimburse the cost of enforcement. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Well, Ben, let me start off here with what you talked about in terms of enforcement. The bill says these penalties are available to employers who knew or should have known that someone was here illegally. Should have known, that sounds like an invitation for racial profiling, where you're going to go ahead and say, well, this person is brown, maybe I should have known. Aren't you going to end up with employers racially profiling?
I don't think so. Respectfully disagree. I think at the end of the day, should have known would have been, to me, just means you should check. Anyone that's here. I mean, I'm an immigrant myself, as you know. So I don't think there's any reason why you shouldn't check if you don't know the person. But there are other sections in the bill that make it pretty clear that someone that does know, for example, that the individual that they're hiring is legal, they don't have to use this program. If they don't have to go through that step if they already know. So I think it's just a common sense way of phrasing it.
The other half of that says requires the Attorney General or the county attorney to investigate any complaint. So basically, if I call the county attorney's office, I say, you know, the people over at Channel 12, their key reporter is an illegal immigrant. Any complaint? I don't see anything that requires it having meaningful or anything. This just says you will investigate any complaint.
Well, I'm not an attorney, not part of the Attorney General's office or the county attorney's office, but I can tell you that they receive frivolous complaints all the time. They have a process for dealing with those. I'm assuming this would be handled the same way any other frivolous complaint would be handled.
But this is a mandatory. You shall investigate. This isn't just a frivolous complaint. Oh, we can do it. It says you shall investigate. You're wording your bill.
Sure, but there are all kinds of laws that say the same sorts of things. So that, again, that process is no different. Shall investigate might be a very, very quick lookup, presumably through the E-Verify system, for example. And you could see that person is legal. Okay, we're good. Moving on. Other questions?
What kind of county or municipal welfare program do you have in mind in this legislation?
I would say any county or municipal.
Can you name one particular program in the city of Phoenix or Maricopa County that this would apply to?
I don't work for Phoenix. I've never been involved with the county, so I don't know exactly what their programs are called, but I do know that they do have assistance programs, everything from rental assistance to other types of assistance programs that would be encompassed in this.
And have home builders, this appears to apply to home builders, were they, and correct me if I'm wrong, were they excused in their use of subcontractors? Was that excused in previous E-Verified laws?
Again, unfortunately, I wasn't here when we did in 2008 when the original E-Verify law was there, was negotiated and was passed. So I'd have to look into that and get back to you.
The subcontractor language appeared to apply to home builders.
In this case,
Disagree with that? Yeah.
I mean, the idea here is that everyone that is working in Arizona should be working legally. Correct. Yes.
What is your actual confidence level that this will make it to the finish line as written right now?
Well, so first of all, as a matter of process, anything that we introduce has the reason we have hearings, the reason we go through committee and then through the floor and then it goes through the other chamber is to make sure that that the intent of the law or that the final product is what was intended. And as such, I would expect that there might be some wording changes to make sure that we get and that we don't accidentally cast a net that's too broad or that we miss something at the same time. So that's part of the process. But in terms of finally getting across the finish line, I'm very, very confident that we will get a product that does what the intent of this law is. Well, it's what the law is intended to do across the finish line.
So you think Democrats across the aisle and the governor would also be on board with the intent of this?
This is a ballot referral. As such, it doesn't matter what the governor thinks on this. I'm not sure what my colleagues on the Democratic side of the aisle think on this, but we were going to have that discussion, and we'll see where they end up.
Speaker Toma, how would this look in practice in the agricultural sector, where it's common for workers to be paid under the table?
I resent that.
Well, we do have Chairman Dunn here, which I'm sure we can, after we're done with some of the other questions, I'm happy to have him talk to you directly about that because he understands that on a more regular basis. Again, the limits in here are, there's a dollar limit in here for $500 or more. So I would say anyone that chooses to try to pay someone under the table would be clearly breaking the law, and as such would be guilty of a Class 6 felony, and they need to be aware of that.
This is another ballot referral. Can you talk a little bit about how Republicans are doing this? I assume because there's a concern that maybe Hobbs wouldn't sign something like this, and is there any concern that that there's going to be too many ballot referrals, that the voters could be confused by how many ballot referrals there are going to be on the ballot.
Well, there's always concern about too many ballot referrals. That's not new. That happens every year. And this year in particular, there are more referrals even than before. Perhaps, to state it bluntly, because we're in a split situation party-wise. Having said that, though, the border is the number one issue, and illegal immigration and border security is the number one issue on voters' minds pretty much nationwide at this point. So it's not even unique to Arizona, but it's especially important here since we are a border state. So I would say this one's pretty straightforward. Remember, E-Verify has already been litigated. The Supreme Court has already decided that it's constitutional, and this strengthens that program that already exists. I think voters know what E-Verify is. I think they're generally supportive of it, and as such, to me, this is a common sense approach.
Your number about the cost of illegal immigration, much of that is K-12 education, which the state is powerless over. If you factor out K-12, what's the actual cost in terms of benefits?
Those weren't my numbers, Howie. As I said, let me find it here. The Federation for American Immigration Reform gave those estimates. I don't know whether they included K-12 or whether they excluded it. I would have to, we'd have to look into that and get back to you on it.
So let's get into what's a state benefit. Arizona has a self-funded unemployment insurance program. The employers pay in. Their premiums are based on how often they dismiss people without cause. And there is no state money involved in this. So you're telling somebody who already been hired by somebody, well, they were fired, oh no, now you can't collect benefits, seems to help the employer. Why should unemployment be considered in this?
Well, if I'm not mistaken, they should have never been hired in the first place, because the original E-Verify should have been used in that particular situation. The idea here is if you're here illegally, then you shouldn't be able to take advantage of any of our programs. And as such, now this, again, expands that, and if there are loopholes that we need to identify, as was mentioned earlier, that's part of the process of having these hearings, to make sure that we do, in fact, catch and eliminate all of those abuses in the future.
It seems like the penalty should not be against the employee who had worked in good faith. The penalty should be you go after the employer who hired that person and allow this person who actually worked to collect the benefits. Why are you penalizing?
Okay,
the employee?
I get what you're saying, but I'm going to take issue with the fact that you said the employee that's worked in good faith. If they've worked in good faith, but they know they're illegal, and especially if they've used forged documents and a forged identity in order to be able to get hired in the first place, I'm not sure that you could say that's in good faith.
What about the employer? This was an issue last time around. Should the employer be penalized?
Well, in the bill, the employer, as I said, the employer is fined $10,000. On top of that, they'd be guilty of a Class 6 felony if they knowingly or actually prevented someone from doing their job. Someone perhaps, that prevented another employee from doing their job and checking. So I would say that's pretty clear that there's punitive action against employers.
You're running for Congress. Would you have voted for or against the bipartisan border security bill that was negotiated by the Senate?
I'm sorry, what are we talking about? Are you talking about the national bill?
Why are we talking about
congressional stuff?
Okay, we're not talking about congressional stuff here.
Right now,
Sure. Okay,
He's here, the Speaker of the House.
I am the Speaker of the House. I'd like to point out that I've been involved with every major bill for the last few years. As a matter of fact, many of my bills have been the defining bills of sessions in 2019 and 2021 and 2022. This is no different. This is what voters care about right now, and that's why we're addressing it.
if you were elected to Congress, would you vote
Can we stop
for
talking
We'll talk about Congress separately. We'll talk about Congress separately. I'm happy to talk to you about Congress after this, if there's this conversation.
Another press conference by bashing Biden for not doing anything.
Right.
So why not address the question about if you were in Congress, because you are running?
So the reason it's more than fair to point out that the federal government has not done its job is because the federal government has not done its job. I mean, everybody knows that they're in charge of immigration reform. As a matter of fact, they've been actively preventing us, in some cases, from doing what we can to help them. They've failed on immigration. They failed on border security. They've actually caused the humanitarian crisis that is at the border at this point by having policies that incent people to come here and to effectively invade. And way too many people than we can handle, which is why we're having these conversations about the cost and so on. So in terms of whether or not I would personally have supported, I could tell you that as far as I understand it, I don't think there should be, there are issues with the bill. Let's leave it at that. Let's move on.
Counties and cities, would they have to do E-Verify for their licenses as well, since the state now requires that for licenses?
That is correct. The bill is very explicit on that they would have to do it as well.
Licenses, like
I'm sorry?
That would include food handlers licenses, any kind of license?
Any kind of license issued by a city or a county or the state would have to comply, correct?
So the tamale bill.
I'm sorry?
So nobody can sell tamales without getting their
Without
food
proving
handler's
that they're
license
here-
and
that
having
they're
them
here
E-Verify for their
Food handlers is
And-
food handlers.
Yeah, right. Let's not cross things. Yes.
Are you going to raise money off this bill with your
Well,
congressional
next
lobbying?
question is terrible.
No, I have no such plans. I have no such plans. Thank you. I have no such plans, but thank you.
Speaker Vince Alvaro,
Yes.
how are you? So good morning. Thank you for being out here with the legislature, senator, and the representative. We appreciate it. I know everybody's going all over the place, but the bottom line is we can protect the border, but yet we're going to protect the people that are making money and paying, taking people, like charging them with a crime while they're hiring other people. It's not going to raise the cost. How are we going to police them if we can't police our borders?
Again, we're having this conversation, sadly, because the federal government has refused to do its job, which is to protect our borders. And at this point, in terms of us at the legislatures and myself, of course, among my colleagues here, we're trying to find ways that have already been established as constitutional to ensure that our laws are protected and that our citizens are protected and that our citizens and our taxpayers don't end up having to foot the bill for the failures of the federal government, again, having failed to do its job. That's why we're having this conversation. That's why I introduced the bill. That's why it's written. That's what the intent of this clearly is.
Well, this measure seems to suggest that we have flaws with the E-Verify system. What are some of those flaws with the E-Verify system? Where apparently this measure seems to suggest that some people have been falling through the cracks and getting away with it.
I'm not here to. The primary purpose of my bill is not to criticize E-Verify. It's to strengthen it and to ensure that it covers more and more people that to your point, that have fallen through the cracks or that have abused the system in some way. So the idea here is to address the actual issues at the border, not necessarily to point any flaws with the current E-Verify system. Okay, one final question. Yes.
About that.
Yes.
The E-Verify program is for employers, and it's just there to determine whether someone is authorized to work in the U.S.
Mhm.
The agreement that employers sign says that they can only use it for hiring decisions. What is the legality basis for using it for benefits?
The Supreme Court has already, as I've said before, has already determined that E-Verify is constitutional and can be used and can be mandated to be used by the state. We're simply expanding this to be used by state agencies as well, and also those that are really two things: the state agencies and municipalities, as we've talked about before, and also for employers that are using it to hire independent contractors in some cases.
Do you think it's constitutional to say that we're going to have a state law to make it so if you cross the border illegally, you can be arrested under a state crime, as is one of the bills in here? You say you want to do something that's constitutional. Did you read the Supreme Court ruling on Senate Bill 1070?
Yes, Howie, I did read it on Senate Bill 1070. We're not talking about Senate Bill 1070. We're talking about the original E-Verify, as I mentioned before, which was passed in 2008, and that was the last question.